So good morning, welcome to NOAA Live. My name is Nicole Bartlett and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. This series is sponsored by NOAA's Regional Collaboration Network, where I work, which is spread across the country and helps connect people to all that NOAA does. Our amazing partner is Woods Hole Sea Grant, located at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. To find out about future webinars, you can look under the Woods Hole Education. You can look at the Woods Hole Sea Grant Education tab on their webpage, or simply follow them on Facebook. This is our 30th webinar and the 11th week in a series designed to help you get to know NOAA and some of our incredible experts during these months of school closures. All of our speakers work for some part of NOAA, and I know that James and Ellie and Sloan and Raven can all tell you what that stands for. That is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Today, we are introducing you to Ryan Freedman of the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary in Santa Barbara, California. So Ryan got up nice and early to be with us today, and we're very grateful. While we'll be talking about NOAA's role in conservation and management, we want to recognize that we are all coming to you from the traditional lands of Native communities who have substantial traditional and local knowledge and much to share with us. We acknowledge that Ryan comes to us from the land of the Chumash peoples, and we're hosting this webinar from the ancestral lands of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead-Aquina. A few guidelines before I hand you over to our speaker. You're all muted because we have a lot of people on the line and we want to make sure everyone can hear our speaker. However, there's a box where you can write questions. Just like you told me where you were from, that's where you're going to ask questions for Ryan. Just put those in as we go and I'll be keeping track for him, and we'll stop every now and again to answer a few. We may not get to all of them, but we're going to try to answer as many as we can. All right, Ryan, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
Thank you for coming, everyone. It's really awesome to see people from all over the country join in to do this webinar with me. I'm going to be talking to you about giant sea bass, the kings of the kelp forest here in Southern California. A really cool and special fish that we have here at Channel Islands, which is the part of NOAA that I work for. But I've been asked for you to grab some things. So if you have them handy, I'll give you a few minutes or a few seconds to go grab them. If you could have a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, that would be really great for folks. If you don't have that, that's fine. You'll still be able to learn something, but I want to give everyone sort of a minute to grab that and have that handy, because we'll have a couple activities throughout the talk that will use them. So I'm going to give you kind of 30 seconds now if you could grab something nearby. But if again, it's not necessary to learn something and have a little bit of fun.
Okay, they're telling me they've got it. They've got their pens and paper.
Cool. All right, well, just a little bit about myself first. My name is Dr. Ryan Freedman. I grew up in Chicago. You can see my family in that center picture. And I grew up to a restaurant family and far away from the ocean. So for those of you not familiar, Chicago's on the Great Lakes, which is a really special body of water, but far from any of the salt water that I work on now. I started kind of my marine biology career teaching at the Shedd Aquarium, which you can see in the picture in the upper left, and went on from there to get my undergraduate at University of Miami, where I worked for a coral lab, as well as for NOAA's Office of National Marine Fisheries, which is another arm of NOAA down in Florida. And then from there, I went on and did my master's at the Cal State Shark Lab, and have been in Santa Barbara for about 6 years, where I've been working NOAA's Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, and also completing my PhD at UCSB. So I came from the middle of the country. You can come and study marine science from anywhere as long as you're really interested and passionate. And I'm happy to talk with folks later if they want to ask me questions about my career, how did I end up here. But as I said, I'm currently at a Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. So what is a sanctuary? So sanctuaries are special places that the U.S. has designated special protections for in the marine environment. So the marine environment is where the ocean is, so it's salt water. So anytime you hear me talk about marine science or marine anything, we're talking about the natural world that's in the ocean and not in a freshwater lake or a river or on land. So the U.S. has designated national marine sanctuaries as special places, and they offer them protections for, to keep places that we find special, unique, and pristine for the come visit and use them, and they're in good condition. So there's sanctuaries all over. Here's a big map of the United States. You can see up in the northern part is the big mainland, then Hawaii's off to the left. Can some people maybe find what their closest sanctuary would be? Maybe we can get some answers in the chat.
Yeah, so Kyle says that he's really close to Flower Garden Banks. James here in Mashpee knows that we're very close to Stellwagen. Hudson, and he must be in Ann Arbor, he's really close to Thunder Bay. So yeah, we have some folks. Oh, and Owen says he's near Gray's Reef or Monitor. So we got a pretty good geographic distribution here.
That's awesome. Yeah, all of them are really special and unique in their own way. So I encourage you guys to get out and see your sanctuary if you can, or at least visit their pages. There's tons of really good interactive dives that have 3D goggles and really to check out these special places. But I'm going to bring it down and focus on the special place I work for. So Channel Islands, you can see there denoted by the red dot. So if you take a look, that's off the west coast, kind of in Southern California. Just to orientate you, Southern California is quite a little bit by Los Angeles, but a lot of people know, or San Diego's in Southern California. But there's also a bunch of islands off Southern California. So we're zooming in to where that red dot was. And you can see the dark blue boundaries around those islands. That's the actual sanctuary water. So we protect the 4 northern islands, so Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel, as well as in the lower right hand of the screen is Santa Barbara Island, and we also protect those waters too. So the red boxes that you see around the islands are no-take reserves where people cannot go fishing, and then their fishing is allowed in the rest of the state. We protect a lot of really cool places in the sanctuary, and what makes this place special is it's at the break of a biogeographic break. So it's really, really cold over by San Miguel, and it's really, really warm to Anacapa Island, sometimes as much up to 10 degrees within the sanctuary. It can change, which is pretty substantial for a marine environment. So what do sanctuaries protect? We protect the animals, we protect the plants, we protect the seafloor, we protect shipwrecks and native Chumash heritage, and we also protect the water itself. So we think about the pollution that can come in and affect the water quality. So in short, sanctuaries, we think about and try and protect everything in the sanctuary to keep it as best in its best condition for people to use it. So as I said before, we have a lot to think about, right? Because we protect everything. So we have to think about pollution, where people are going scuba. And we have to think about fishing, where and what kinds of fishing and where they occur. We have to think about noises as they come in the sanctuary, because sound actually travels in water a lot better than it travels in air. We have to think about accidents that happen on the water. So if people collide or boats run into on ground, we have to think about boaters and where boating activity happens. And we also have to think about where science happens and where scientists get to do their work or have to do their work. So it's a really cool thing about my job is we get to think about so many different things and help people really get out and enjoy the sanctuary in a way that keeps it healthy. So here's a really good place to stop if I have any quick questions about the sanctuary or about me. And then we'll kind of dive into the world of sea bass.
Awesome. Well, we do have a good question that Mila just asked about your previous slide. She wants to know, what is noise pollution?
That's a great question, Mila. Noise pollution is when there's boats or other things in the water that are making really loud noises that wouldn't typically be there. So we think about this as maybe boat engines, but you can hear lots of things underwater. So we can hear storms. So when fireworks are going off, they can hear that underwater. Or if there's explosions underwater, those are all things that we can consider as like noise pollution. And some animals are really affected by it. So we know that marine mammals and whales, it really clogs up their hearing. So when there's too much noise in the natural environment, it can disrupt a lot of things that happen. So it's important that we think about noise as a potential threat to some animals that are pretty sensitive to it.
That's great. So Ellie asks, and you spoke briefly about this, but your audio might have cut out when you were hitting on this, but they want to know, she was asking, is there anything that we don't, quote, protect in the sanctuary? So I think you talked a little bit about uses that are allowed to happen. So it's not like it's not like there is no extraction whatsoever. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the mission statement of the sanctuaries is to encourage sustainable use. So we try and balance the different activities that happen, but some things that can't happen in any sanctuary would be energy extraction. So no oil rigs, no pulling of like different mining. Those kinds of things are strictly prohibited. They don't happen in any sanctuary, but there are activities like boating and fishing and both recreational and commercial fishing. So those, we try and balance human activities when we can in order to allow people to really enjoy their sanctuary. I hope that's answered that question.
Okay, you were a little garbled there at the end for me, but we have a lot of questions coming in about Seabass, so I think you better move on before we get
okay,
a
yeah, sorry. I will speak louder and more clearly into the microphone. So I'm going to play this video for you really quickly. We'll watch about half of it, but this shows us diving and looking for giant sea bass here in the Channel Islands. So this is at Santa Barbara Island, that really shallow area. The island I point out that's kind of south of the main four or the top four. And we're diving here looking, kind of getting a count of how many giant sea bass there are. And this is in a kelp forest. So it's a very special habitat that we have here at the Channel Islands. So these large kelp fronds, which is a marine algae, grow and support really high biodiversity in the sanctuary. So I'm going to cut over to this other movie, and hopefully you guys will be able to see it. And I'm going to So you can see the giant sea bass is coming towards the camera, and there's another big one behind it. So you can see these fish get pretty big. All right, so let me get back to my slides. So everyone, I hope they've been able to see kind of what a giant sea bass looks like next to one of our divers. That she was diving. Julie Bursek is another one of the scientists that work with me, and she's also over 6 feet tall. So you can see that that is a pretty big fish when you compare that to the size of the divers. So I want to welcome everyone to the world of the giants. So this is a really cool special fish that we have here at the sanctuary. And up until a few years ago, the fish was really, really rare. So we didn't really see very many of them. And when they started to come back to the kelp forest a few years ago, a lot of researchers started to band together to understand how this fish was coming back and what that really meant for because it's a return of a really important top predator for the kelp forest. So why study giants? So we once fished this species too much. We took too many back in the 1920s because they were so big and so cool. People really liked to fish for them. They were fun to fish for, and people wanted really big, impressive pictures of these big fish that they pulled out of the reef. But we ended up taking too many, and the population or the number of how many were left in the wild went down too fast. So we lost this really important predator in the kelp, where these guys are the biggest sort of fish in the kelp forest, and they're really important to keeping the ecosystem healthy. However, the state of California started to protect them, so you can't catch them recreationally anymore, and they're very, very limited. You can only catch them on accident commercially. And thanks to those protections, the species is coming back, but we still have more work to do. Understand what sort of threats this animal faces and what issues it may encounter and how it behaves to better enact further protections to make sure that the species keeps coming back. So they're giants for a reason. The diver like of my size would be 6 feet, and these fish can get to 7 feet and over. So that's a pretty big fish when we think about it underwater. And here's some pictures. As I said, back in the 1920s, they fished for them pretty heavily. You can see these are fish being hung up next to the fishermen that caught them. So you can see quite often they would be taller than the people that actually caught them in the first place. So it's pretty impressive to see these old pictures of this big fish being caught back in the day. So what do we need to know about this really cool fish? So what habitats do these fish like? So a habitat moves and kind of moves around. And what do we think about the recovery of this species? So what sorts of, how do we know that the numbers were coming back? And how can we continue to make sure that more and more fish get added to the overall number in the wild? And what kind of threats or issues does this fish face? So what are the problems that a giant sea bass may come into in the wild that we need to start thinking about, and hopefully as the sanctuary start helping this fish come back into our kelp forest. So where do they go is a big question and an important question for all animals that the government is looking to protect. It's important to know so we can put special areas where people might not be able to fish them, or we limit their interaction with other problems that they may encounter. So GPS, like the things you use in your car, or you use to track deliveries that come through, those don't work underwater. So once you get under the first couple inches of water, GPS no longer works. So we need to think of what other technologies we can use to record fish movements and apply them to make sure we know where sea bass go. So the research group here has worked with a bunch of different partners to employ a couple different technologies to monitor and track sea bass at the sanctuary. So the first of this is what we call acoustic telemetry. So acoustic is just a really big word for sound. So on the left, you have what is I'll call an acoustic tag. And that tag is basically something we put on the fish that makes a noise at a very high frequency that people and a lot of animals can't hear, because we don't want other animals to come bother the sea bass because they have something that's making sound on them. And then it's about the size of a so you can see that there is in my hand. And then we also have the acoustic receiver. So it's the black thing on the right, and that's a football that has a special ear at the top that listens for the sound of the tag. So the tag, the acoustic tag, basically makes a train of sounds, so multiple sounds, and the spacing between those sounds correlates to a number. And the ID, which you can see on the tag on the left, it will be like the number of seconds. So that ID is 9716. So it would be 9 seconds, 7 seconds, 1 second, 6 seconds. And the spacing in between the beeps, as it's picked up on the receiver, it records an ID and the time and date of where the fish passes. So this is a unique way, because sound travels really well underwater, to record where fish are going. So I have a little activity. Is everyone ready to count? I'm going to play 5 with a couple seconds. I want everyone to count out in their heads and then report back on what the ID is. So I'll play a sound, you count 1, 2, 3 to the next sound, and that, if you have 3 seconds in between, would be the first number in the ID. Is everyone ready?
So, hang on 1 second, Ryan. Let's give him 1 second, because your audio has been breaking up. I want to just make sure that you don't have any other applications open on your computer, just in case. And then maybe if you could repeat the instructions one more time for us, just to make sure everybody knows what we're doing.
Yes. I don't know why it's cutting out on me. Let me just do this.
That's okay. If I notice that we can't hear you, I'll just ask you to repeat whatever you've said, but the instructions got a little garbled. So if you could repeat those, that would be great.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I will play a sound, and we will count the time in between the beep. So a beep, you'll count 1, 2, 3, and when you hear the next beep, you'll stop counting. And if there's 3 seconds in between the beeps, that will be the first number of the ID. So I'm going to play 5 sounds, all of the same sound, and I want you to count the time in between those sounds in order to get an ID number. And that's basically how the technology works in real life. So we'll start again. I will play the first sound. I want people to count. They'll hear the second sound. They'll write that number down, and then they'll start counting until they hear again. And we're going to play 5 sounds total, and then you'll know there are going to be 4 numbers you'll need, because they'll be in between the first sound to the second sound to the third sound to the fourth sound, and they're all going to be the same. So I'm just going to ask you guys to count in between those beeps. You ready?
All right, I'm going to try it too, Ryan. I'm going to see if I can get it. Okay, so I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
All right,
All right,
so
who's got it?
we should have a 4-digit number, right? A 4-digit number.
Yes, a 4-digit number.
Okay, so let's see. We've got 4372 from Mila, 6291 from Kyle, 5392 from Texas. That's the same one that I have, so we'll see if we're right.
That's what I have. Yeah, that's what
Oh,
I
that
have,
is it.
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 5392 was the correct number.
Yes. So I know it's kind of hard when we're all kind of counting over webinar, but these tags happen in milliseconds. So the gapping between the sound is very, very quick. So it's even less than a second. So great job to everyone listened. Those numbers were very close. So everyone did a really good job that I heard the numbers guessing on. So when we have, so we hang these receivers all over the place, and when fish that aren't tagged swim by, nothing happens. But when we have an animal that's tagged, and the sound train goes off onto the receiver, it'll record the ID and location at that receiver, so the time and the ID. And so the more tags you put out, the you can track movements of more fish. So you need both lots of receivers and lots of tags out for this technology to work. And then you can pull those receivers and download the detections through time. So download the number of times that that receiver heard the tag. And we have these receivers all over the Channel Islands. So you can see here, all the dots in yellow are areas where we have receivers just listening for all sorts of animals, giant sea bass included. And then we also have a very directed, targeted project here at in Santa Barbara Island. So you can see the island here is actually the hash markings in the middle that kind of has the two little and brown and tan areas show different kinds of seafloor. So there's rock and sand in all these different areas. And I just wanted to show you that so you can see we put these sound listening receivers, these which are represented by the purple dots, in all sorts of habitats because we want to know what kind of habitats that these fish are going in. So this is looking at the island in total, and I'm going to play this video for you. And this is the detections through time. So the receivers are denoted by these pins, and the pins are going to have dots on them. So you can look in the lower left. The bigger the dot, the more detections or the more number of times that fish came by that receiver, and it'll be denoted by color too. So the warmer the color, the more fish there are. And so we're going to see 2 years of data. The date's going to be rolling by on the top. And I'm trouble. We have this video loaded. Maybe I should just do this.
It doesn't want
so
to
you can
play.
see the dots are moving very quickly. I see it playing in the top. Is it not coming through?
Okay, I'm starting to see it. It's just, okay, we've got it now. There's just a slight delay, kids, so just be patient.
Yeah, sorry. So you can see when there's a lot more dots, they're popping up all over the island in the summer, and then it kind of goes quiet in the winter. Make sure that the delay doesn't come through too bad for you. Has it stopped playing?
Yes, for us, it stopped paying. And just to clarify, this is not just a single fish, but all the fish that are tagged, right? How many fish did you say you have tagged out there?
Correct. We have 12 fish tagged at Santa Barbara Islands. That is the detections of all 12 fish at each of these sites. So from the video, where do you think that these fish really like to go? Do you guys have any spots on the island that you guys think you saw a lot more detections than somewhere else?
Okay, were you guys seeing where all the circles were lighting up? Which side do you think? So somebody says, oh, they're using the actual buoy name. So somebody said SB10.
Okay.
Hudson says the right side. Cameron says SB9. Ashley says on the east. So yeah, these kids are pretty smart, Ryan. I think they figured it out.
Yeah, you guys all did really good. So it's all the detections summed up at one site. And you can see, again, the warmer the color, the more detection. So all those guesses were good. There's a lot of detections at SB10, SB9, SB9.5, and the east side of the island, these fish like a lot more. It seems like we have a lot more detections of these animals there than on the west side. So good job, everyone, for picking that up from the movie. So this is showing the number of detections. So again, that number of times a fish is recorded on the whole array through the day. So the bottom, that 00 is basically midnight, and it counts all the way to the next midnight on the bottom. So you can see in the morning, around 4 in the morning, activity on the array is really low, and then they start coming back around noon, and then there's a lot more activity on the array at night. So we see fish come back and use the array, and the habitat a lot more during the nighttime hours than the daytime. So I think this is a good place to stop and take some more questions if folks have them before we get into the next section.
Oh yes, of course I have some questions for you, Ryan. So earlier on, Will and Frankie wanted to know if you ever use submarines in your work.
So I've used submarines not for this stuff, but we use submarines in a special tool called an ROV, which is remotely operated vehicle, which is like a submarine that doesn't have people in it. And we use that to study things that are really, really deep. But these fish are at diveable depth. So a lot of what we do is with scuba, because they're only at about like 60 to 100 feet, which people can still get to without submarines or that special equipment.
See, that was a good question, guys. Keep them coming. Okay, so we have a lot of budding biologists in the crowd today because I have a series of questions.
Yeah, I can see.
About, let's see, Andrew and Texas both want to know what sea bass eat. Eliana wants to know the size range. Adela would like to know how much they weigh, and Kyle would like to know their average lifespan. So I think these are probably all things that you you worry about too. Do you know any of those things to share with us?
Yeah, so we know we're still trying to work out the diets and age and growth of these fishes. We do know we had to use those old photographs that I showed you before to guess how big that these fish got, because we didn't really have any big adults left once they were all taken by fishing. So we're still kind of working out what they eat and how big they get and how old they live. That's still work that's being conducted. So those are all really great questions that we're trying to tackle ourselves. So everyone that's interested, just stay tuned and hopefully we'll start having some better answers.
Great. Now they remind me of bass that I've seen in other places, because Jennifer wants to know how fast they can swim. They don't seem to be built for speed. What do you think?
They are not built for speed. So when you think about a really fast fish like a tuna, they're very long and slender and look like torpedoes. These guys are built to eat. They got big, big mouths that open really wide, and they're big and hefty. So they're like little tanks. So while I've seen some move quickly, like short sprints, they're not the kind of fish like tuna or swordfish, which we imagine going very fast over long distances. These guys are built to eat around the reefs that they inhabit and not really built for speed.
So that actually brings me to Owen's question, which he wants to know, do they travel from the Channel Islands to different locations, or do they pretty much stay close to home?
So what's really cool is we know these giant sea bass can hop from island to island. We know that we've gotten fish that were tagged at Catalina, which is another island in Southern California, and they show up in Anacapa, which is over 100 miles away. And we know that they can make it to the mainland. So we're seeing these long distance movements. We know that they can, but we're still trying to record how much that actually happens. So again, these movement studies on them are still very new. And we're trying to figure that out as we are diving into this world of giants.
Cool. And one last question before you move on from Liam, and I believe someone else asked it earlier. What is your favorite part of your job?
I think my favorite part of my job is being able to come to work with a bunch of really awesome people and tackle new questions about see corals, and we think about fish, and we think about sound and all these really cool pressures and parts of our environment. And I think the fact that I get to do a little bit of work on a little bit of everything is the best part of my job.
Let's see. Morgan wants to know, how do you find the sea bass? So when you to find them, to tag them.
We ring the dinner bell, as they say. So when we bring in sea bass to tag them, we use basically bait. Like you would put a bait on a hook to go fishing. For those of you who know or have gone fishing, we basically use calamari, so squid, and some anchovies, and we put it in a bag, and the diver will take it down and squish it, and that makes a big, smelly, stinky trail. And the fish respond, so they come right up and come looking for food, and that way we can come in and tag them, because they'll come close looking for the food. But they're pretty friendly to divers. Once you have a big fish of that size, not much is going to eat them. So when divers are in the water, they're pretty curious. There's a lot of photos or stories of people being able to pet them underwater, and they call them like little dogs, because they are pretty curious and come right up to divers. So it's pretty easy to get tags out on these fish.
And okay, another question from Juan. He'd like to know, do they lay eggs? Like, I think about fishing for smallmouth or largemouth bass here, and sort of the way they push rocks together and sort of get their beds and everything. Do you know much about how these giant sea bass have their babies?
We're still learning about the reproduction process and how they do courtship, but we know that they don't lay eggs in the ground, but they put their eggs in the water column, and the eggs float along and hatch in the water column and then recruit to the seafloor. So they do have eggs like those fish, but they're not putting them in the ground or in rock.
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop and let you keep going.
Great. All really, really good questions. Thanks for asking. But we're going to talk about this other aspect of the fish that is really cool. So we think giants are talkative. So we know that they can make these booming sounds. We don't have many records, but we think that the fish produces sound, and it's really important for their communication. So we're going to play another little game. I'm going to play a series of sounds. I know some of you that are have been tuning into this webinar for different animal sounds from different presentations. So we're going to kind of see how much you remember and quiz you on some of them. So everyone get ready. I'm going to play 5 sounds in total, and I want you to write down what animals you think produce it. And we'll talk about animal communication and the different kinds of animal communication through. So is everyone ready? All right, I'm going to play your first sound. All right, everyone write down your guess. Are you ready for number 2?
Okay, wait, maybe we should do them one by one, because I'm going to get all these answers. Oh, that's right. You're going to reveal them all in sequence. Okay, so it's okay, go back. So everybody just kind of write your answer down, and then when
one by one.
Are you sure? Okay. All right. So Raven Raven thinks that's a whale. So does Isabella and Kyle, Ashley and Trina. We got a couple votes for dolphin.
Ooh, yeah, it's close. It's actually a humpback whale. So those that guess whale were right. That's a really good guess.
All right.
So the humpback whale, they use those songs for communicating with each other, and they can communicate across long distances. And it's pretty cool. Are you guys ready for number 2?
I think we're ready.
All right. Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let's see. Ashley says it's a seal. James says it's a dolphin. Ellie says it's a sea lion. Kyle, do you really think that's a frog? That's what Kyle says. Marin says sea lion. Mila says walrus. We're getting a lot of variability on this one. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of close guesses. It's definitely a marine mammal, but what you're hearing is an orca whale or a killer whale, which is actually closer to a kind of dolphin. So there's a lot of close guesses, but what you're hearing is an orca whale, the kinds of the black and white iconic whale of the Pacific Northwest. You guys ready for number 3?
I think so.
Here we go.
Oh, that one's really cool. Let's see. What do you think, guys? That one was kind of short. Let's see. James says beluga. Isabella says dolphin. Texas says dolphin. Marin says dolphin. We're getting a lot of dolphins. Everyone thinks it's a dolphin.
I may have thrown you guys off, but that's actually a lyrebird, which is a mimic bird in Australia. So I apologize for not doing exclusively marine mammals, but it does kind of have like a dolphin quality marine mammal sound. All right, I'm gonna play 4, and I heard this animal come up as a guest before, so hopefully people can pick it up. All right, who knows what 4 is?
Okay, we are getting a lot of seals. Everyone thinks it's a seal. We've got a couple of sea lions, but yeah, that seems to be the consensus.
Yeah, well, I mean, they sound very similar, but those who guess sea lions are right. It's a California sea lion. So that's a recording from a haul out.
Wow.
And you can hear that they're very loud. They sound like barking dogs.
All right, good job, Marin and Owen and James and Liam. Good job. They got it.
Good job. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, the last one is kind of tricky, but hopefully some people get it. I will be really impressed if anyone gets this one.
Okay, now this is not, I happen to know this one, and I can tell you it is not a bird. So you guys have a good shot at this one. Let's see. Margaret thinks it might be a boat. We got a couple of boat ones. Mila thinks it might be this.
Sound like a boat.
It does sound like a boat.
That's a good guess.
Yeah.
All right. So, ready? It's this fish. It's called a Plainfin Midshipman, which kind of looks like a weird toad thing. But they make that low buzzing sound when it's as a mating call. It sounds exactly like a fish. But isn't that a weird sound for a fish to make? I think it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
I think so. Mila guessed Seabass. Unfortunately, we don't have really good records of what Seabass sound like. Divers underwater say it sounds like a boom, like a faraway firework when they come, and we think that communicate with each other or defend territory. We're not quite sure, and we're still trying to figure out why sea bass make sounds and get good records of what that sound is and describing the calls of sea bass. It's still work in progress, and the sanctuary is interested in finding out why these sounds are occurring and what other potential sounds are in the same octave band at the sanctuary that could be potentially drowning out this communication. So it's a lot of work in progress. We just started this sound project for them. And we do this by using SoundTraps. So it's basically an underwater microphone, the same kind of microphone that you would use on land, just all packaged up and protected for the water. And you can see in the image on the right, the silver thing on the boat deck, that's the actual hydrophone. So that's the actual microphone that we put underwater and record them. And we dropped our sound trap at Santa Barbara Island in the area that I have circled in red. So that and we're hoping at times when we get a lot of detections or the Seabass show up on the VR2, on the acoustic receiver, we'll also be able to hear them communicating with each other or making these booming calls on the sound trap. So that's one of the projects that the sanctuary is working on right now, and hopefully we'll get some good records of the Seabass. So I'm going to blow up that picture. This is what the equipment looks like when they go in, which is all nice and clean and yellow. And this is what it looks like when it comes out. This is an actual sound trap being recovered up in Washington on the same project. And you see there's lots of kelps and algae and little mussels and barnacles. They all end up growing on the equipment. So we need to swap them every 3 months in order to keep the equipment clean, make sure that the batteries in the hydrophone is still good, and that we're keeping the equipment work, because the animals and sound. So we gotta make sure that the equipment stays clean. But you can see it can get kind of dirty. Marine science can actually get a little dirty. So we put sound traps all over the sanctuary, and we are hoping to record all kinds of animal sounds. As I played all of those different sounds for you, we actually had Plainfin Midshipman come up on our receivers or on the sound traps in the northern 4 islands. And we're hoping to understand how animals communicate in the sanctuary and what other sounds we may have, be that boat engines or explosions or storms also make sounds that we can record underwater. And also we're hoping to record those giants. Understanding the soundscape and thinking about sound is a new thing in marine science. So it's kind of cool that we get to work on this new budding field. So before I move on to the next one, I'll take any questions again. One little quick round.
We don't have too many right now, but Liam, could you ask if you could clarify how long was that sound trap underwater?
3 months, so not a very long time.
Okay. All right. I think we're okay right now. So go ahead and go, Ryan, and that way we can save time, because I know you have an activity and I don't want to run out of time.
Yeah, no problem. So there's one more way we study giants, and that's their spots. So as people may have seen on the photos, giants have these spots, and they stay the same from when they were babies. So that orange fish up in the corner is actually a newborn giant sea bass. They look very, very different when they're little, but the spot patterns we're pretty sure are the same. And if you look at the big fish on the side, there's these dark patches, and those spots are unique, like your fingerprints. So everyone's fingerprints are unique. We can use that to identify who's who. In the same way, these animals have unique spot patterns, and we can use them to figure out who's who. So we're going to do a little game. So I want everyone to pull out that pencil and paper that I asked, and I want you to make 5 random dots on that paper anywhere you like. So pull it out. You can close your eyes. You can do it any way you want. Make 5 dots on that paper. I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to do that. All right, so hopefully you guys have that 5 dots on your paper, and I want you to pick the most middle dot. So even if you don't have a perfect middle, that's fine. Find the most middle dot, and I want you to use the width of your thumb, so the width right here, and measure the amount of thumbprints you have from the middle dot to all of the other 4 dots on your paper. So I'm going to give you some time to do that. So again, take the width of your thumb and measure from the hand over hand and get the number of thumblets you have from your middle dot to your other 4 dots.
Okay.
When you've got all of those, yeah.
Go ahead. I just was making sure that everybody heard the instructions. So you're
Yeah,
just follow along on the slide there.
yeah.
And okay, so Ellie says 6 is her number.
6 is her number. Do we have some others?
Yeah, so Texas has 4, Isabella has 10, Marin
Okay.
has 12. Let me give you just a few more. Kyle has 14. Raven and Bridget both have 3. Eliana says 7. Mason says 15, and Carrie has 5. 4 for Maggie, 8 for Jennifer, 1 for Morgan, 11 for Margaret. Oh, we're just getting a lot of numbers, Ryan. So lots of, they're all over the place. 23. That's
Oh,
the highest
good.
I've seen.
All over the place. That's a high one. So that's really cool because the spots on the patterns of these fish are really different. So it's great to see those different numbers. Everyone has a unique number, which is sort of like everyone's got their unique spot patterns for these giant sea bass. So we identify the spots and where they are on the fish. And you can see a person will come in and click where the spots are. And then special computer programs identify those unique spot patterns and measure the distance between that one spot that they're looking at and all the other spots on the animal. And they do that for each spot. And by looking at all of those numbers, we then can identify which fish is which because they all have a unique spot pattern. So we actually are looking at those distances between spots to identify and tag fish with a tag on that. That way we can look at just pictures and know where a fish is and how that fish got there. And we can look at their movements on long scales of time because I take a picture of fish at Santa Barbara Island and then a recreational diver takes a picture of it on the mainland by Los Angeles. We know that that fish had to move that distance. So we both can get a running number of how many animals are out in the wild as well as look at how they're moving around on a long time scale because the spots should never change. So where do we get the images? So for those who are on the phone and are scuba divers, you can help too. You can send in your spotting giant sea bass photos with where they are to this website with our partner UCSB. We also look at the internet. So anywhere where we see pictures online that have really good location information, we'll use those too. And then the sanctuary drop cameras. So there's these special cameras that we put down that have GoPros in them. So some of you probably have GoPros, and we just put them in the special rig with this long arm of baited food to draw in the sea bass. So I'm going to play one of these videos for you now at the kelp forest at Santa Barbara Island. I'm going to do this one first. So you'll see the first thing to come in frame is a bat ray, and then you'll see the giant come through.
Okay.
So you can see that white PVC pipe has the bait arm, and you can see this giant comes through and comes to check it out. And you see we can use this video our thoughts are on the animal. I have one more I'm going to show you.
Wow. Were those 2 videos taken in the same spot, Ryan?
They're taken on the same reef, but they're from different drops. So it looks very similar because they're both on this area we call the mound, which is this really neat spot at Santa Barbara Island, 9.5 and the mound area. It's all that reef tract right there. So the kids that pointed that out as the high quality habitat, this is what it actually looks like underwater. so people can see. And with that, I am going to shout out to all the people that helped make this work happen. So this includes the Sync Sound project, who put out all the SoundTraps we were talking about, and that includes the Naval Postgraduate School, Moss Landing Marine Lab, the Navy, NOAA Fisheries Service, and Scripps Institute of Oceanography. And then for the spotting giant sea bass work, that includes Cal State Northridge, the Love Lab here at UCSB, and the Benioff Ocean Initiative have been really doing that photos and the spotting work. And then also thanks to Cardinal Point Captains, who's provided us and helped us get people and tags out onto the water. And of course, my home institution, the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. So for questions people have, and thank you so much for coming and learning a little bit about sea bass today.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us, Ryan. Everyone really enjoyed the videos. Those were so beautiful. The water looks a lot different there than it does here on Cape Cod, that's for sure. I do have one question. In that last video, that was a bait trap used to get really images of the fish so that you could look at the spot patterns. But do you have any idea how big that fish was that we were looking at there?
So we put 2 cameras out, which basically we call like stereo cameras, and we can use those to actually get accurate measures of the fish. And that one was just short of 5 feet. It was about like 4 feet and 10 inches. So it's a big fish.
Liam, that was a big fish. That was a good question. All right, well, we are just about out of time, unfortunately, but I can tell you, you answered just about everyone's questions that they had. A few folks wanted to go back and do the sound again, but I'm gonna ask you guys to just look for the recording. That'll be available in a few days on our channel, and you can check that out there. I also want to let you know that later this week on Wednesday, we have Anna Mercer coming to talk to us about fisheries. So she'll be here on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we're actually hearing from another sanctuary, the Monitor Sanctuary, which I think we had a few folks that were near that one. So totally different, other side of the country. And so that's exciting as well. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your passion for giant sea bass. And we wish you luck, and we can't wait to see what you figure out. So we'll be paying attention. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you so much.